Two people can earn the same money for 20 years, make the same salary, live in the same city, have the same opportunities, and still end up in two completely different financial worlds. One buys a house, the other invests every single month. At first, the house buyer looks smarter. He has something real, something visible, something people can point at, a gate, a roof, a key, a title. The investor, he just has discipline, an automatic transfer, a boring habit, and numbers on a screen. So naturally, most people respect the house first because a house feels like success. But here's the real question. After 20 years, who actually has more freedom? Not who looks richer, not who feels safer, not who gets the most compliments from relatives, who actually built more wealth, who has more options, who sleeps better when life gets expensive, and who can stop working first. That's where this gets interesting, because buying a house can absolutely make sense, but calling every house purchase a great investment, that's where people start lying to themselves. So let's break it down with two people, David and Michael. Same age, same income, same starting point. But one chases visible security. The other chases invisible compounding. And after 20 years, the gap between those two decisions becomes impossible to ignore. David is the kind of person most people understand immediately. He wants something solid. He doesn't want to feel like all his hard work is floating around in the market. He doesn't want his money sitting in paper assets he can't touch. He wants something he can stand in front of and say, "This is mine." And honestly, that feeling is powerful because a house does give you something emotional. It gives you identity. It gives you proof. It gives you a sense that you are no longer starting from zero. For a lot of people, that matters more than spreadsheets ever will. So David makes a decision early. He says, I'm going to buy a property, even if it takes years, even if I have to stretch, even if I have to use almost everything I save, at least I'll own something real. And once David makes that decision, his brain changes. Every bonus becomes house money. Every extra paycheck becomes deposit money. Every conversation becomes about location, land value, tenants, and future appreciation. He is focused. But here's the part people don't talk about enough. David is not just buying a property. He is concentrating his future into one location, one asset, one market, one set of costs, one long-term bet. That is not automatically bad, but it is not automatically safe either. Now meet Michael. Michael looks less impressive in the beginning. He does not have a giant visible goal everybody can celebrate. There is no housewarming party, no title document to wave around, no dramatic before and after moment. His strategy is much quieter. He decides that every month, no matter what, a fixed amount will leave his account and go into long-term investing. Not once in a while, not when he feels inspired, not only when there is extra money, every single month. And that sounds simple until you actually try doing it. Because investing monthly is not just a money decision. It is a behavior decision. It is a lifestyle decision. It is a discipline decision. It means saying no when other people say yes. It means skipping some luxuries today so your future has options tomorrow. It means sometimes reducing what you spend on convenience, entertainment, status, and short-term pleasure because your monthly contribution has to happen first. That's what makes this powerful. A house can make you save toward one big event. Monthly investing forces you to become a different person over and over again, month after month, year after year, choice after choice. And that psychological difference matters more than most people realize. For the first few years, David looks like he's winning. Why? Because his plan is visible. People can understand it. He is working toward property. That sounds serious. That sounds mature. That sounds successful. Meanwhile, Michael looks like he's just being too strict with himself, too careful, too patient, too boring. He says no to random spending. He avoids lifestyle inflation. He doesn't need to look rich yet. And in a world where people celebrate visible progress more than invisible consistency, Michael's strategy gets almost no applause. But then something happens. David finally buys the property, and this is the moment most people stop the analysis. Because emotionally, this is where the story usually ends. He did it. He bought the house. He won. But financially, this is where the real story begins. Because after you buy a house, especially one you plan to rent out, the money story is not over. It has only changed form. Now the property has to carry itself. Now the rent has to make sense. Now you have to think about taxes, insurance, repairs, maintenance, empty months, paperwork, and whether the cash flow is actually strong enough to justify the capital you locked inside it. Rental property owners in both the US and UK face taxable rental income and ongoing operating costs, while US tax rules also allow certain rental deductions such as mortgage interest. This is the part people skip because it is not sexy. A rental property is not a trophy, it is a machine, and if the machine is badly built, it will keep asking you for money. So let's say David buys a property and rents it out. On paper, it sounds amazing. A tenant pays him every month. The house is working for him. He has finally entered real estate. But reality is never just rent in and smile. The property might need repairs. The roof doesn't care about his dreams. The plumbing doesn't care about his confidence. A bad tenant can erase months of peace. An empty month can destroy your math if your numbers were already tight. And if the financing is aggressive, rising costs can turn a smart investment into a monthly burden very quickly. Regulators and investor guidance consistently warn that rental property has to cover mortgage obligations, plus taxes, insurance, routine maintenance, emergency repairs, and vacancy risk. UK buy-to-let lending also commonly expects a sizable deposit and rent coverage above the mortgage payment. That's why the phrase real estate is always safe has broken a lot of people financially. Not because real estate is useless, but because too many people buy property for emotional certainty without respecting operational reality. And then there is borrowing. A lot of people feel smart the moment they hear the word leverage. They think borrowing money automatically makes them sophisticated. Now, to be clear, smart borrowing can be powerful. That part is true. Borrowed money itself is generally not treated as taxable income simply because it must be repaid, but that does not mean debt is free magic. If a lender later forgives or cancels debt, tax issues can appear, and the monthly pressure of the debt was real the entire time. That's the trap. Some people confuse not taxed today with cheap forever. No, debt can help you scale, but debt can also magnify mistakes. If your property math is strong, leverage can help. If your property math is weak, leverage just speeds up the pain. So the real question is not, can I borrow? The real question is, can this deal survive the real world? Can it survive repairs? Can it survive a weak tenant? Can it survive higher rates? Can it survive one empty month? Can it survive taxes and friction and the boring costs nobody puts in motivational real estate videos? That is how adults should look at property. Now let's go back to Michael. While David is managing one big asset, Michael is doing something most people underestimate. He is repeating again and again and again every month. And over a very long period of time, repetition becomes unfair because compounding rewards consistency in a way that feels invisible at first and unbelievable later. Investor education from the SEC explains that compound growth means earnings can begin generating earnings of their own over time. Let's keep the math simple. Say Michael invests $1,000 a month for 20 years into a long-term strategy that averages 8% a year. That does not mean the market gives him 8% every year like clockwork. It does not mean there is no risk. It does not mean real life is that neat. But as a clean illustration, that path grows to roughly $589,000 before taxes and fees. Now pause there. Michael did not need one giant miracle. He needed a habit. That is the part most people miss. They are waiting for one big financial move to change everything. One house, one deal, one property purchase, one dramatic win. But a lot of real wealth is less dramatic than that. It is just repeated good decisions, made when nobody is clapping, and this is where the psychology becomes powerful. David got something visible earlier. Michael built something flexible later. David has a property. Michael has liquid capital. David may have status. Michael has optionality. David may be able to say, I own this. Michael may be able to say, I can move, pause, change careers, invest elsewhere, or buy later from strength. That freedom matters because wealth is not only about what you own, it is about what your money allows you to do. Can you breathe when life changes? Can you survive uncertainty? Can you pivot? Can you buy time? Can you say no to bad opportunities? Can you avoid panic decisions? That is real power. And that's why visible wealth and real wealth are not always the same thing. Now, to be fair, this is not me telling you that buying a house is stupid. That would be lazy. Buying a house can absolutely make sense if you want stability. If you understand the local market, if the property cash flows properly, if you have reserves, if the financing is disciplined, if you are buying with strategy instead of ego. There's nothing wrong with property. The problem is buying property just because it makes you feel rich. That is where people get trapped, because a house can give you comfort, but comfort is not the same thing as return. A title deed can make you feel successful, but feelings do not repair cash flow. A tenant can make you feel like an investor, but one tenant is not a business model if the numbers are weak. So the smarter message is this: don't buy a house to impress yourself. Buy one because the math survives scrutiny. And on the other side, monthly investing is not perfect either. It requires patience that most people don't naturally have. It requires emotional control. It requires surviving boredom. It requires ignoring people who seem to be winning faster. It requires staying consistent when your results are not visible. Yet, that is hard. In fact, for many people, that is harder than buying the house because people can save for a milestone. Fewer people can commit to a system. And that is exactly why the system works. Because most people quit before compounding becomes obvious. They stop too early. They interrupt the process. They keep touching the seed before it has time to grow roots. Michael wins in this story not because he found a secret. He wins because he stayed with a discipline most people abandon. So after 20 years, what do David and Michael really have? David has an asset that may have appreciated. He may have rental income, he may have equity, and if he bought well, financed well, and managed well, he may have done very well. But he also spent 20 years carrying concentration, property friction, and operational responsibility. Michael has a portfolio built on repeated contribution. He has liquidity, he has flexibility, he has a financial habit that can be aimed at almost anything next. And here is the line that matters most. Michael did not just build money. He built a person who knows how to build money. That is bigger. Because once you become that person, you can buy assets later from a stronger position. You can buy property later with better judgment. You can fund a business. You can survive setbacks. You can create options. That is why in many lives, disciplined investing does not just compete with the house. It eventually gives you the power to buy the house too. So what is the lesson? Not never buy property. Not stocks are always better. Not houses are fake wealth. The real lesson is this: do not confuse visible security with true financial strength. A house can be a smart move. A house can also be a beautiful trap. Monthly investing can feel slow. Monthly investing can also quietly change your entire future. So before you rush into property because it feels mature, ask better questions. Is this house actually an investment, or is it just an expensive symbol? Will the numbers hold up after real costs? Or am I only in love with the idea of ownership? Am I buying this because the math works, or because it helps me feel like I've made it? And if I put the same discipline into investing every month for 20 years, what would that version of me become? That is the comparison most people never make. And that is exactly why so many people look rich without ever becoming free. So now make your pick. Would you rather spend 20 years chasing one visible asset, or spend 20 years building invisible discipline that compounds into options? Would you buy the house first, or invest monthly first and let your freedom grow before your status does? Neither choice is automatically wrong. But one mistake is very common. People buy the feeling of wealth instead of building the system that creates it. So choose carefully, because the thing that looks safer today is not always the thing that makes you wealthier tomorrow. Borrowing money is generally not treated as income just because you received it and must repay it, but canceled debt can become taxable. Rental property is not just rent coming in. Owners have to account for taxes, insurance, maintenance, emergency repairs, vacancies, and financing. In the UK, buy-to-let commonly requires around a 25% deposit and rent that covers more than the mortgage payment. In the US and UK, rental income tax rules exist, but the exact relief and deduction rules differ. The long-term investing side is strongest when it is consistent and compounding is allowed time to work. A $1,000 monthly example at 8% for 20 years is roughly $589,000 before taxes and fees. Understanding wealth means understanding how wealth actually grows. And once you understand that, you stop making money decisions based on emotion and start making them based on numbers. That's when you can clearly see the difference between buying a house, saving money, and investing every single month for 20 years. Because long-term wealth is not built on what feels the safest today. So if you're serious about understanding wealth, growing wealth, and making smarter financial decisions in 2026 and beyond, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because on this channel, we're not chasing the feeling of being rich. We're learning how to actually become financially free.